Hello, good creatures, and welcome. My name is Petrina Calder, and I'm here with my friend Nate.
Yes, and this is Nate Bowling here, and today on the Creature We Become podcast, we're going to be talking about The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter.
I wanted to thank you for recommending this one, Nate. It was certainly an interesting read. But before we get into the specific themes of the book, I just wanted to talk about our overall impressions first about the story. So, what did you think of this one, just general terms?
Generally, I think there's a lot of things I really liked about the book. I think for me, it connects into some of the things that are not so obvious in the world when we're not somebody that has done a lot of outdoors things, which I think for me was a big connection to it with myself growing up in a really small town and really spending my life doing a lot of things outdoors and then really getting back into more of my roots in the last 5 years or so of my life. And I think it makes some really good connections to the modern world that I think are not so obvious for people who are not, I'd say, have a skill set in given things like behavioral constructs or nutritional related networks and how kind of our let's say our bodies were designed over time. I like the connection to the outdoors and the theme of the book going through Michael's journey through this sort of hunt story that he goes through. And I think a lot of key takeaways were connected to this hunt and the things he learned along the journey of it. And I think there's a lot of really good things that I liked about the book, and then some more journalist related themes to writing that maybe could contradict some of my own viewpoints on certain strategies with exercise and nutritional interventions. But overall, really love the book. I think it aligns with my perspective on physical challenges and the comfortability of our physical environment in today's society. I would say those are my big takeaways just off a broad theme of the book. What about yourself? What were your thoughts, impressions? What did you like? What did you not like?
I think for me, this book was a real mixed bag. I think if he had just written it as a memoir of like, he was a dude living a very modern life and then decided to challenge himself and then learned about hunting and went on this, big challenging hunt in Alaska. That was a really good story. His personal story of going on that journey was really good. It was compelling. It was interesting. What he did with that in terms of trying to then turn this book into, he has some worldviews, some perspectives on life, some points he wanted to make, and how he cobbled together his argument for that, I think was a real mixed bag. Some of it was good. Some of it was just honestly like bad and disingenuous writing. There were, for example, like if you're going to cite me studies, and then sometimes you're going to cite the specific authors of those studies and the bougie journals they got published in because like, oh, I've got a good source for this one. But then in other points you're making, you're going to say, yeah, there's research about this, but you're not going to say what that research is, where it is that you read it, who did it, who published it. Like you don't even name the person. That tells me, okay, the research you're citing is probably fucking dodgy. And your point is on shaky ground, and yet he doesn't make any distinction in terms of how he's presenting that information. And so there's some things in this in terms of stylistically his writing style and how he hasn't approached it. He keeps calling himself a journalist, but he's approached this not in a way a journalist would. He has approached it as the way a person would write an essay, which is that I have a thesis that I am putting forward at the start of the book, which is that the modern world is full of ills that are making us sick. And he's not wrong about that. But then he just goes and cherry picks a whole lot of information to support that thesis. And some of it's good and some of it's research-based. And some of it is just more fringe or extreme or narrow, like in that it might apply to some people, but it's not going to apply to all people kind of thing. So for me, this book is a real mixed bag, and I take issue with how he has failed to support his thesis in some pretty disingenuous ways. But
Yeah.
we can maybe talk about that more as we get into it, because I do think there's some really good things in here, Nate. So I do thank you for recommending it. It was the stuff that's good in here is really, really good.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of the points because whenever you come from if you're sort of trying to make academic arguments, you kind of have to play to the academic playing field, where it's like if you run the story, then you're running the story, and it's like there's no like it's a narrative story about his learned journey, and you
Hmm.
can't refute that. Like it's like
Exactly.
this was the journey, this is what he learned about it, applied to himself, and you can take with it what you will, but this is what I think about what happened here,
Yeah.
versus going after it academically, then you're under a different sort of battlefield. And I agree with some of the points, because then sort of some of this stuff blends, where he's talking about research into a lived experience. And I think the lived experience is the real story, and then the
Yeah.
research validates certain micro details about the lived experience. But when you cross lines too quickly, too broadly to too specifically,
Yeah.
you can, I could see where your thought would go there, because when I read this book, I wasn't looking at it too academically, and some of the things kind of went over my head because it's already, there's this book falls into my wheelhouse. So I
Yeah.
can already kind of pretty easily distinguish cherry picked points and good points, and okay, this is good, this isn't, maybe not bad, or they're not great, but I didn't even, when you would have, I think it would have really hit with your academic knowledge, and you would almost like, I could see it all play out. Yeah. So I like that. I think it's an awesome book. And I think you have valid points there, and I think we'll get into that. So let's get into some of the themes that we were able to kind of take from the book and apply it to sort of action. I think what we think about it, how we applied it in our own life, maybe, or the stories that we have implementing the topics, and how we applied it. So we kind of identified three sort of central themes that I think we're going to discuss in depth, and see how long we get into it. We kind of identified the modern comfort and its costs. We identified this concept of the misogi, and then topics related to his experience in the hunt. And we start off with the first theme, and I think is a pretty overarching theme in the book, is that the modern world has or let's say, the modern world has created a playing field of more comfort, and there's been costs to us as human beings in related to these modern comforts. A topic, I would say, the comfort has become the silent killer, growth, depth, and resilience. And one quote that kind of comes to mind that I like is, we're living progressively more sheltered, sterile, temperature controlled, overfed, under challenged, and safety netted lives, which
Yeah.
is one of the things that he worded in the book. So on the modern comfort and its costs, what were your thoughts on this theme? Let's say your key takeaways, and maybe things you agree with or don't agree with.
It's interesting because I just took a big dump in our intro on this on this book and his approach, but there's actually a ton of stuff that I agree with, particularly when it comes to the problems with our modern lives. And it's interesting. I would take issue with his framing of it, like that evolutionarily we were designed for X and now we're living in Y and we need to go back to X. It's like,
Mm,
no, that is not the solution, sir. But that doesn't mean that there aren't actual problems with our modern lives and the way we're living them, particularly with just how sedentary our lives have become and how risk averse we have all become as well. I think some of it has been born of like necessity, but some of it is just we have grown less risk tolerant over time. Um,
mm,
so, for example, like in our modern lives, we now work in the information age where often the greatest, like I know this is true for myself, like the greatest skill set that I bring to the job is not manual labor. I have done manual labor jobs. There's real value in doing those jobs. Like I found value in doing those jobs, not to mention that those jobs are absolutely essential for our global economy. And at the same time, often the thing that is moving us forward from like a development and a technology perspective, and the greatest resource I bring to the job is my knowledge, my brain, how I
Mm,
think, what I know, how I problem solve. Um, and I don't, that's not a problem to me. What is the problem, though, is that in prioritizing knowledge and intellectual growth and development, we've become really disconnected from our physical selves. We've also become disconnected from our emotional selves. Um, and I think that'll come up in some of the other themes, so I won't jump ahead. But I do think we often treat ourselves, and I did this too, we treat ourselves as though we are like heads in jars. Like I could just download my
mhm.
consciousness into, like, if it were possible to like clone a body, I could just download my consciousness in it, and that would be good enough. Like I could just transfer to a different body. Um, as though the thing that's valuable in us, the whole of ourselves, is in our brain. We know that that's not true. And I think one of the things that that I also really agree with in this is that he makes the point that in terms of the sterility of our environments, that like we have really done terrible things for our gut microbiome in how we have made everything so antiseptic and so
Mm,
sterile, and we have abused antibiotics in a way that is making us sicker and really quite endangering our species, especially around poor stewardship of the antibiotics, at any rate. Um, the point is that the physical bodies our brains inhabit are just as much a part of who we are and our intelligence and our ability to do the work as our brains are. Like our brain and our intellect is not separate from our bodies. And so I think we have lived in a modern world that really treats the brain as though, and our intelligence as though it's a separate thing from our body. The body is just like an accessory that's carrying around the brain. Um, and I think it's really divorced us from that connection to the physical and all of the embodied ways that we experience our world.
mm, mm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's interesting the playing field of antibiotics
Mm,
and things that it's done to our gut microbiome and other things,
yeah.
especially when we start getting into the details of antibiotics. Now, that's outside of my wheelhouse. I'll let somebody else discuss antibiotics. I think for me, the modern comfort and its costs, I think, play really deeply into the struggle for survival, where survival is a lot of times guaranteed now. Like I'm not worried when, and I say a lot of times, it's always guaranteed. I'm not worried about death when I go to work this morning. But I think a lot of his points were just drawing back to an older time. Now, I say rummaging through society and destroying everything, I don't think is the way to go. But I think drawing on the sort of fishbowl concept,
Mm,
where we wouldn't blame fish for bad water if the
yeah.
fish are dying and the water's toxic. Now we're humans. We aren't living. We have choices we can make related to our nutritional, physical, and mental well-being. We're not fish. We're not byproducts. But I think the modern playing field has then taken the struggle for survival out. So that was the meaning. It's like we had to survive today, and that was the number one cost. And then through that, it's like the celebration to gather food every night. And the celebration you see in indigenous populations, and you see in more Eastern culture, you see like dinner is a party. And it's like, because if you look at back on different time fields, we had to struggle to survive. Every day was a struggle for the survival. Now, our modern comforts aren't necessarily the problem. I think it's the byproduct of the modern comforts into the machine that we are and the way our brains and physical bodies were designed. Like I like your topic on that your intelligence and the development in this landscape is not a problem. Like
Yeah.
we are much more versed into our intellectual spectrum than any other point in time. But then what we've done is we've lost a lot of these certain skills related to physical movement qualities. And if we're thinking about the struggle for survival, we had to have the physical machine work really well. And then so we had these ingrained movement patterns that we graduated through over time from sort of young adult moving up. And we had these certain exercise routines that were a byproduct of what we had to do to survive. And then so I think where the modern comfort and its costs come into me is basically just the physical stress tolerance going down, the
Hmm.
mental stress tolerance being shooting through the roof because, or say 1,000 years ago, we weren't worried about our financial situation in 22 years. We had to make it through today. And then so us trying to make it through today was a lot less long-term stress and more short-term stress. So I think that one of the things that he talks about in the book is basically these short-term stresses in relation to fighting for survival. You know, you have to get food, you win that day, you've made it. When that was a stress response to a recovery response, a stress response to a recovery response, when now in a lot of our modern society, we have this delayed stress response
Hmm.
that just travels up over time. And I think we'll go over it into other parts of the book. But then our physical stress tolerance or our physical environment in related to stress has gone way down. Our mental stress has gone way up. And then now we have an environment where food is guaranteed. And so the disconnect from the physical environment to the mental environment to the nutritional concept has gotten a little bit further and farther between. I can understand applied biology, but I don't understand a nutritional deficit.
Hmm.
It's like I can understand certain relations to computer programming, but I'm not aware of my physical movement patterns and how I feel in my body. And it's like I think the modern comfort plays out where, for me, the central theme is just the struggle for survival dipped down, the stress we could think ourselves through, like the internal stress has gone way up. And then we've got disconnected from our food sources and then how our food sources interplay into our, I think the group community as a whole,
Hmm.
where a lot of times if we're thinking about a struggle for survival and we wake up, our goal is to get food, everybody's mission to get food. We have this big celebration at dinner. We have dinner, we go to bed, and then it's this cycle. Well, now a lot of the modern system has disconnected us from food, and then our physical capabilities are not now a necessity. They're you don't really need it anymore. And then that's the physical, our discussion on the car. So now the function of the car is gone way down. The intellectual capacity of the driver has gone way up. And then our nutritional environment related to these two components is had some things that play out into a landscape that's a little bit, I wouldn't say it's like, because I agree with some of the concepts on he paints it too much as bad because we can't go back. But I think understanding how we were designed matters. And I think we'll cover a couple different topics, but I think I'm going to sum this up is that I think that the modern system has just played out to a point where we don't have to have the physical capabilities to survive. And then now we've upregulated our mental stressors per se and our mental capabilities. And then the nutrition environment has gotten disconnected from our physical, mental, community related dynamics. Net, any top thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. I think we actually need to give a caveat at the start of this conversation that I really wish Mr. Easter had also put into his book, which is this, is that there's actually two. One is that, like, he talks about, like, food is guaranteed nowadays. It didn't used to be. We used to have to go hunt and gather. We're so far away from hunting and gathering. There are some hunter-gatherer societies, but, like, we've got agriculture. But the other thing is, just because we have agriculture and even industrialized agriculture and food is often available, food insecurity is still a very real thing for many people for economic reasons and geographic reasons that are now related to how the economic system has changed. And so this whole conversation the arguments that he makes in the conversation we're having kind of pretends as though that whole economic system doesn't exist. And so I want to just name that, like, Nate and I recognize that we are speaking in generalities and that the economic system is very real and that there are people who deal with food insecurity. What we're
Mm,
talking about is just in general terms, the average person is an average in our system. I think the second point that he never kind of acknowledges, that I think is also important for us to acknowledge, is the fact that, and because he makes the point a bunch of times about how, like, oh, if an animal is old and sick and injured, then it dies. Like, nature is brutal, and that's how nature works, and that's how humans were used to work. And it's like, actually, there's lots of anthropological research that shows that humans have always had this altruistic streak, that we take care of our young, we take care of our elderly, and we take care of our disabled. And that hasn't always been true, but that's when it's not true, that's usually due to economic pressures and not due to survival things. And so I think, like, to say that a human only has value when they are capable of sustaining their own survival independently is just such a twisted modern Western interpretation of evolutionary theory. It's not even evolutionary fact, it's evolutionary theory, because
mhm,
like, anthropological facts show that humans have taken care of they're sick and they're ill and they're dying humans and animals in the fossil record. So anyway, I just want to put that caveat out there that, like, he doesn't acknowledge the economic system. He doesn't acknowledge the existence of valid human life with disability. We
mm.
recognize that, but we are going to follow his train of thought in terms of, then, for the average person in our system, let's follow his train of thought in terms of how he wants to build these arguments.
Yeah, it's funny the amount of wheelhouses he popped into in this book, which is a very general but specific concept, was quite vast, and it does kind of relate it to almost a romanticization of a time that is far gone from our current reality.
Yes.
I think where I'm gonna sort of go from here is what's real in a sense. Like, I think what's real is the way our system is designed, where it's this sort of seek, attain, latent period, seek, attain, latent period. And it's like the very premise of our brain and what we needed to survive: gain food, reproduce, sleep.
Yes.
Gain food, survive, reproduce, sleep. It's like, okay, one, we are much more complicated than that. But then I think where I like his premise on the modern comfort is in that wiring. There's a couple things in our society today that disrupt certain patterns that we would have grown to develop in relation, for me, specifically exercise and nutrition. And I think we'll get into some of those topics. So another theme that underlined this sort of comfort, a modern comfort, and its cost, was this solitude, stillness, and boredom theme. That modern stimulation robs us of the focus and inner stillness that might have been more habitually common in a past time. Do you have any thoughts on that theme?
Yeah, I think he's got a really valid point with this one. And we're seeing it shift, like, within our own lifetimes. We're seeing a big shift in terms of the volume and speed of information that comes at us and that we have to process, and what that's doing in terms of shaping cognitively, because our brains demonstrate real plasticity to be able to adapt to um, our needs. And what we're seeing is that people's attention spans are shortening. Their capacity to stay focused and present on a single task for longer periods of time is diminishing. But that's it's biasing in terms of what's necessary in our modern society, which is to process large volumes of information at speed and try and make sense of it. And I think that we are losing something in the process, like that ability to do deep focus, to have stillness, to be with our own thoughts, to tolerate quiet. And I think that that's already causing and going to continue causing a lot of problems for people in terms of like feelings of anxiety or
Mm,
difficulty with focus and attention. At the same time, it's a highly adaptive response to our modern society. And I think the question becomes like, do we just continue to allow that to happen and see what the fallout is and then deal with the fallout, because there's parts of it that are adaptive in terms of our modern world being just so, there's so much information coming at us so fast, we need to process. Or do we try, is it the wiser thing? Is it the more adaptive thing to try and run counter to that and give ourselves the opportunity to process the information that's necessary, but also take these moments of pause and to disconnect. I am of like a generation that like I'm Gen X, and so like I predated all of this stuff, and I've changed with the times and seen how much has changed just in my own lifetime. Um, and I see like the impact on myself in terms of my attention span. And I don't know, like I don't want to be one of those old fuddy-duddies that was like, back in my day, this is how we used to be, as though that's again romanticizing that idea of that there being a better time. And at the same time, I do think that there are some modern problems in terms of like anxiety, being able to tune into your feelings, being able to pay attention to what your intuition is telling you, being able to tolerate boredom, being able to tolerate being alone with your own thoughts. People, I
mm,
think we're seeing a real big rise in mental health problems, particularly around anxiety and depression. And I don't have evidence for it, and so I'm not going to cite a single research study and say that this is proof, Mr. Easter. However, I do think over time, longitudinal studies are going to show that this does seem to be one of the trends. Like I do think that there's an argument to be made for the value of not just leaning into speeding things up all the time, like to actually develop a dual skill set to be able to be alone with your thoughts, to be in the quiet, to think deeply on things, to stay focused, to monotask rather than multitask,
mhm.
that kind of thing. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. I think I'm just going to attack things that are in my wheelhouse
Okay.
where things like blue light exposure
Yeah.
before bed, suppressing melatonin production. And then that we have less sleep sleep duration with lower qualities of sleep and less REM cycles. And then we connect that blue light stimulation to a brain that was used to having night and day. And then so that this modern system that we've created is then specifically overstimulating the way our brain interprets light, and then how that affects our circadian rhythm of night and day.
Yeah.
That's in some senses a catastrophe. Like we have this system that's been developed around the sun, and now we have these lights that disrupt some of that system, then affect our quality of rest.
Yeah.
And then we put something like freaking social media out there. I'm a rant about social media
Do
for
it.
a second because I think it plays really here. Social media is a monster. Your brain is really good at trying to navigate through a story and trying to predict the outcome before it happens. And our brain runs narratively in that pattern. Like we're trying to figure out stories. Say a movie, this 2-hour long story, conversation. What is this person trying to convey to us? What is the point? What is the information we need to gain out of this story that is being told to us? The story of our life, X, Y, and Z. But so movies, 2 hours, conversation, 5 minutes. Oh my God, social media. Imagine 5-second stories for 30 minutes straight. How many stories did we have to interpret in that freaking cycle.
Mhm.
And let's say this is 30 minutes doom scrolling. I know people who commonly are scrolling 2 to 3 hours before bed. So in 2 to 3 hours, a cycle of at most a minute video, and a minute video is long.
Yeah.
Most people don't make it through a minute video. The research on the social media side of things say you have about 5 seconds to garner some attention. So let's just infer that data, and we'll say that most people are commonly paying attention to a video 5 to 10 seconds. So that's, say, 6 videos a minute and played out over 3 hours. That is fucking exhausting. And you wouldn't even know it. And then so now you've been scrolling 3 hours before bed, blue light all up in your face in this little box.
Mhm.
So that's part two, melatonin suppression, dopamine suppression. And then the way our brains hardwired to big environments, to small environments, are we look at little things for danger. What is that little thing? What was that movement? Like our brain's wired for this evolutionary survival mechanisms. So it's like narrow points of view, fight or flight.
Mhm.
Little screen, 3 hours, 5 minute cycles right before bed. Oh man, our recovery's mangled. And then now we have that over cycles of like,
Yeah.
good God, how long of a like a habitual pattern where we're spending 3 hours before bed, let's say 2 hours, even 30 minutes. Scrolling is a recovery monster because neurotransmitters are finite. The way our brain communicates information in our nervous system is finite. We don't have this unlimited supply. And if we're specifically talking about dopamine, we have a longitudinal, like a over time depletion, and then we also have a cycle of shorter ups and downs. So if we have a period of exhaustion, we'll have a long period of layover. If we have a really extreme exhaustion, we'll have an extreme need for layover. So specifically with some of our modern landscape in relation to stillness and boredom, this is where it really meant something to me, because he mentions that the modern stimulation robs us of focus and inner stillness. And I think that in my wheelhouse, that is so accurate because of just those three things. There could be some more things, and from what I see from people in exercise and nutritional interventions, where if we're just ramming through neurotransmitter depletion because of a hyper stimulated dopamine like angled attack machine, which is social media, because attention is currency.
Mhm.
And then where we put that in is most of the time bed. Most people, they work hard days and then they get home and then they're looking for something for downtime. And then now phones are starting to replace TV. And so now social media is then now become the primary use of some of the phones. And then so now right before bed, you kill the opportunity for meditation, journaling, these very productive tasks that you would have otherwise chose in an earlier time period that was absent of social media. It's
Mhm.
like the sun's coming down. I'm not exactly sure what hunter-gatherers did right before bed. I'm assuming it was converse with other people. I don't know. The sun went down. Who knows? But what I do know is even just like one generation back, what's relevant to what you said is we weren't scrolling on social media. And a lot of people are quick to undemonize social media. There's, oh, people were reading papers, people were reading books. It's not the same thing.
Not same.
It is not a little mini blue light sun 3 inches from your face where you have to mass interpret 10,000 stories in an hour right before you were going to go to bed, where you would have otherwise done tasks that were more valuable. The specific landscape of that in our modern environment is hostile, and we're going to see serious repercussions, okay, of that over time. And I think that it's not to, let's say, like, make it sound nasty and survivable. It is nasty and it's going to cause you problems. You're going to feel less motivated in life. You're going to get up the next day. You're going to work less hard. You're going to be less motivated. You're going to be less focused over time. You're going to start to lower your attention span, and these long tasks that delay gratification are going to seem more daunting.
Hmm.
And then we're going to have these increases in anxiety and depression, which we're already seeing. And just from not citing any research, systematically, I know that's going to happen because of what scrolling before bed would do to you. So, and scrolling before bed is something I talk to a lot of people about on the coaching side. Stop that. Go to bed. You put your phone away and you go to bed. You leave your phone outside of your room. And I'm not even perfect because I've gotten in cycles of it. And then I've seen how detrimental it's been to me over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just from specifically too much stimulation, we have some things in the modern landscape that are really detrimental, and we have to work in order to move back from them. And we have to understand it's just like a nutritional intervention. We have to work to, let's say, implement things that are less stimulating, and then we have to get back to those times where we would fill that lower stimulation with something potentially more meaningful. And for this example, specifically with myself, is journaling has been a very, very, very valuable internal tool that I've then worked to replace certain overstimulating things. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say scrolling on the toilet in the morning versus going to the bathroom without my phone, thinking about what I'm feeling, going from the bathroom in that 10-minute void of no stimulation, which the first time I started doing it was a lot, and then moved my way over to starting to journal every morning.
Mm.
And I think specifically with the overstimulation, it doesn't necessarily have to be boredom. I think we just need to intentionally put ourselves in places where we can lower our stimulation, specifically to, I would say, attention and light related things, and replace it with less stimulating things that have a longer return on development of self over time.
Yeah.
No,
I
you
think,
got it.
yeah, because I think you've really highlighted, like, physiologically the problem with that habit. And it is a problem. I mean, no bones about it. It is causing problems for people with their sleep and with their anxiety and their attention spans. Um, and that's to say nothing of how problematic the content can be because of the way the algorithms try and because our attention makes people money, they try and figure out what it is we pay attention to and then try and feed us more of the same thing. And what tends to happen is that people end up in these echo chambers. I've been in I've done therapy with some young people who have come in, young men genuinely afraid about approaching women because they're like, I've seen women talk on TikTok, and like, is this how women are? Because this is what I'm seeing. And I'm like, no, that's not how women are. That's how some women are. And the algorithm has figured out that you pay attention to those things. And so it's just feeding you more and more extreme versions of the thing that you're afraid of. But that's, I think, one of the real dangers with social media. It's not just about what it does to us physically, but it's also about how those algorithms work. If we are not really cautious about intentionally curating our feeds for ourselves, so that we don't end up in those echo chambers, or that it's not just fearful or doom scrolling, it can become really toxic really quick. And there are, like, as you said, then there are other activities that we are not investing in when we are spending lots and lots of time and scrolling. And I think that sometimes people think like, oh, I don't have time for things. And it's like, have you actually added up how much time you spend scrolling? Because it's a lot. Now, having said that, I am not a Luddite who's going to say, I think we should, like, social media is terrible. We should all dial back from it. No, absolutely. It's enjoyable. It can be really fun. When you curate your feed, so that it's
Hmm.
all like dogs and sports. It's like, that's a pretty good feed. Um, but at the same time, um, like it needs to be kind of kept in check because, as you say, there's
Hmm.
some um, from like a dopamine hit perspective, it tends to hijack our natural impulses in a way that it becomes very mindless, very like mindless in the sense of being not mindful. We're not aware of it. It becomes habitual really quickly.
Yeah.
And so we just need to kind of maintain some awareness about our consumption and about when we're doing it and how it's affecting us.
Yeah, I really agree with that, because the feed and the echo chamber has really created a playing field that is really interesting
Yeah.
because we learn how to behave in relation to our perceived social context.
Mm.
And when you're on social media, you fire out into a universe that's curated for yourself.
Hmm.
And so you start to believe narratives in the echo chamber of the social media cycle that then start to affect how you behave. And then what you do is you then go into a social environment and you echo some of the cycles from the social media wheelhouse, and then you get bad social feedback because it might not always necessarily apply.
Yeah.
And then there's a V chart here. Is one, you either go back and say, oh man, maybe that was crazy, or the nastier one is you then go back to the wheelhouse and you think the social environment was the bad place.
Hmm.
And that's really nasty because then you start going through this cycle, and the social media is also curated. They want certain demographics consuming certain information, and then the algorithm picks up on things. So it picks up on nasty things too. Like, okay, you paid attention to this video where someone gets killed, or there's this racially discriminating video, or there's this like kind of it's almost like a social context sexually, like males and females interacting together, and now you start getting all these extreme viewpoints
Yeah.
that you would have not otherwise seen in just this one-on-one community context, which I think is really nasty. And it plays into this another topic that comes in, which is this story he goes over with the monk.
Mm.
And it's basically about death and presence of mind. And it really connects to me for the power of vulnerability, where social media specifically is a perfect numbing tool to basically consume information to avoid you from being present of mind.
Mm.
And then for me, I like a good curated timeline of David Goggins myself. I freaking love that stuff. And then, so it's like I love some of the social media stuff. So I agree. I don't think it's this thing that you need to totally rip off social media, but you need to understand it's an echo chamber, that the narrative isn't always going to apply to your broader sense of community, and that you need to curate it, and you need to be careful of what things you pay attention to, because say a wheelhouse where you then move into something that is violent, and then you start to take these narratives in, and then you start to forebode joy in your interpersonal relationships because you're waiting for something really nasty to happen. And then this is a perfect transition into the death presence of mind monk story, where kind of the theme was that he's facing impermanence strips away trivial concerns and reawakens the urgency and gratitude. What were your takeaways from the monk story?
I really love this. So, to kind of elaborate on what we mean by the monk story, he went to the country of Bhutan to talk to a number of different monks and spiritual leaders because Bhutan is one of the places in the world that consistently comes up on the top lists of like happiest places in the world, second only to Disney, apparently. And that one of the things that's unique in Bhutan culture is that they really have, they embrace death and dying thematically as like just a part of daily life. Children are taught about death and dying. Their artwork and their cultural practices are around death and dying. That it's just considered a normal part of life. And so some people have attributed this idea, or I guess Michael Easter went there with a wondering of like, is it because the Bhutanese people embrace death? Is that what makes them so happy? And I really liked this part of the book. I thought that it was really well done because he interviewed a number of different people about the culture and what it was like. And there's some things in there that are about how in modern Western societies, there's such emphasis placed on status through materialistic possession, about what you own somehow gives you validation of who you are as a person and status, whereas in Bhutan they prioritize like everybody owns their own home, and it may not be as fancy as the homes you guys live in the North America, but it is theirs, and that people will be born and live and die in the same communities, and that this idea of death as well is always on the table. So there's a dual piece. One is it's about the lifestyle, and it's about connection to a place and a community, and that is more important for human happiness than status is. Layered in that is also then in their culture, a part of that being connected to community is understanding that like we all die, every single one of us, and within a couple of generations we will be forgotten. And I guess the Bhutanese people really just live with that as like a reality of, and then knowing that you can die at any time changes, I guess, people's attitudes towards their living and what they value. And this comes up in lots of other places, like in the Stoics will talk about the idea of memento mori, and about like remembering you will always die, or always remembering that you will die, and that how that changes our decision making. There's this idea of like if you go looking in decluttering circles because you're needing to declutter, there's this idea of Swedish death cleaning. And what that kind of approach is the idea of like, if you're needing to declutter your space, you want to think about it like, if I died tomorrow and my loved ones had to come and deal with all my crap, how would I clean differently? And so like really to be evaluating, again, all this materialistic stuff that we accumulate through the lens of, if I'm dead tomorrow, does it actually mean anything? Like, does it have any value or purpose? And again, so there's this interconnected thing between like how death shifts how we evaluate the value of life, and then also on the value of life side, looking at like, how is it that we actually find meaning and purpose, and how do we evaluate our own success at life and as humans? And is it through materialistic things, and does that actually matter when we die?
Yeah, I really like the Swedish death cleaning.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before, and it's kind of funny. It's like if I looked around my desk, I was like, oh, nobody would know what to do with any of this stuff. Like it's like the sticky notes on the wall. That's actually quite, I like that a lot. I think this plays actually really specific into one of my world views. I think with the loss I've faced in the times that I've faced them, with losing my mom and dad and some friends before, and this thinking in myself about what I would want to have, not necessarily done fully, but what I would like to have experienced and left behind, and how many people I could have positively impacted is something I've thought a lot about. Has been a central theme of the person I would like to be. And I think the idea of it taking away trivial concerns and reawakening kind of urgency and gratitude, I think lands pretty significantly in our society, where I think, especially in like Alberta, where like, it's like our value is determined by our ability to put out work, and not only work, but like almost time related to work. Like the average working hours in Alberta is like 10 versus 10s and 12s and 16s, and people do 60 days straight in a camp and come home for a month and try to survive after the month. I think it's very easy in the way our brains are wired to just continually try to seek more.
Mm.
Now, to seek more from a survival mechanism is awesome. Like, we're going to get hungry and we need to find food to survive. But to constantly seek more out of external validation in relation to increase self-worth related to output over time, financially, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like the things in the world, like your toys, cars,
Yeah.
clothes, jewelry, whatever it is essentially a way to really ruin your life. Where we know that over longitudinal studies that the number one predictor of self-rated quality of life is related to the quality of the connections in our life, and just constantly sacrificing connections and what we like to do and live in our life, and constantly going after increased monetary gain or toys, trucks, cars, those types of things is just a really good way to end up in a destination where you got a lot of inanimate objects that don't really mean anything to you, but
Yeah.
you pushed away everything meaningful to you over time. And I think for me, this really landed in some of my experiences with the outdoors that we'll talk about it. There's a climber, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I really like his point of view, is that these people are always asking him why in God's name he would do some of these. He's a free climber, so he's a free
Mm.
soloist, so he climbs rock faces without gear. And people ask him why he would do something so stupid. And one of his central beliefs is that he's not doing anything inherently hazardous because he has the skills and the abilities to do so, but he is doing things that are risky.
Mm.
And his view of the world is that a lot of risk is gone and that people perceive risk. So a story he uses is that he's in the airport and people are losing their damn mind. They're running around. They're getting mad at the hostess. They're going all over the place. And he sits there and he goes, it's like, if I'm late today, like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to be fine. And he makes this connection that when he does these inherently risky tasks, he starts to have a perception of the world that takes away the urgency of menial tasks
Mm.
in their relation to broad themes of his well-being per
Mm.
se. Like he really ain't getting that stressed out at the airport when it's like in 12 hours he might be 200 feet up on a rock face. And it really parallels some of my experiences with climbing, specifically when it's like that anxiety hits and the weather maybe has changed and I'm worried about where I'm at,
Mm.
like what I'm climbing. Okay, all of a sudden everything drains out and I'm just thinking about where my foot is and where my hand is. I'm taking in information and all the things in the world, all the stresses sort of drain out, and I'm so immediately present in my environment. And I haven't died yet per se, and nothing's been hazardous. But then what I've noticed is the connection to my life over time is that things just have not really bothered me too much. Like, it's like I'm not really worried about being late. I'm not going to get too flustered over this thing that happened at work, and it's because the ability to control my neurological system on this rock face has then paralleled to my ability to control my neurological state in this mental stress. And then it's also helped my perception of stresses, where a central theme in my philosophy is that if I'm able-bodied and sound of mind, I don't really have a problem.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, it's like things can be hard and you can have things that exist outside of that. But if I'm sound of mind here and I'm able-bodied, I'm going to be able to figure it out. And realistically, it's like I'm going to be okay. And I
Mm.
have to keep remembering that. And I really liked this death story in this Look at the Monk, because it just connects to a whole bunch of things in my philosophy and even things that I've noticed about myself. And I think it really does make a big impact when we start to just imagine what is the wiring and the worry in relation to this experience versus what the actual significance of it is to us long term, and how can we keep grateful for the things in our environment and get less caught up by the modern stresses that are all over the place. And I think there's a concept to me that I really like, that is what fires together gets wired together.
Hmm.
So if we do more things that have a little bit more risk involved, but not necessarily hazardous, we're going to develop a better stress tolerance to that type of wiring. And then when we're living in, we're late for the freaking airport, we might just, yeah, okay, you know what, perspective wise, I'm going to be fine. Maybe this is actually a serious stressor that maybe there could be some significant outcomes of it, but I'm going to be fine today.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to have learned a better association with that stress. And I think that translates pretty well into this concept of the nutrition story, where
Mm.
there was a lot of value for me in the death story, and related to the concepts I just described there. And then there's this nutrition story that he goes and visits what I would say is a very sound of mind nutrition guy. And the concept is kind of like food, famine, and fullness. And it's sort of this story, what he learned in his, let's say, research or journey through discovering certain nutritional concepts. And one of the parts of the theme is that discomfort through discipline, modern abundance, and the connection to food have distorted our relationship around nutrition. Is there anything that sticks out particularly well for you on the nutrition story?
Yeah. There's one chapter in this book in particular that he focuses on nutrition. There's a separate chapter where he talks about the value of fasting and kind of being disconnected from our food supply. But there's one that's specifically about chapter that's about nutrition, where he talks to this guy, Trevor Kashey. And I think the audiobook is about 8 hours long. This chapter is a whole hour. So an eighth of the book is dedicated to this. And it might be the best hour of listening I have done about nutrition in a really long time, because it just cuts through so much of the bullshit that is out there. And that's one of the things that that this Trevor Kashey guy seems to be very good at doing, is that he has been a researcher, but he no longer works in a research space, because he's interested in taking all of that complexity and then figuring out, how does this actually work for humans? And that's just philosophically, I just really resonate with that. And I think you and I, that's what we try and do when we're working with clients, is like, I need to be aware of the research and all the stuff that's out there to make sure that I'm giving my clients good guidance. But in terms of how you apply that, it's not like there's a manual that you can pull to say, like, you have depression, let me get this manual. This will automatically work for you because it works for everybody. That's not how things work. It doesn't work with fitness. It doesn't work with mental health. And it doesn't work with nutrition either. There isn't a one size fits all. And at the same time, there are general principles in each of those disciplines that do apply to everybody. And that's what he really dials in and focuses on. And it's just such a common sense approach to things that I really, really appreciated it. So things like, you need to track what you're eating so that you know what the hell it is you're eating. That you, if you want to lose weight, if that's your goal, because that's not everybody's goal, but if it's your goal, you need to get comfortable with sometimes being a little bit hungry, and to recognize that hunger signals are not an urgent problem to fix, right? They're just a signal that you're hungry when it's all functioning well and healthy. Like, we're not talking about situations where people are hypoglycemic or anything like that. And then also the idea that like, there's no such thing as a good or a bad food. No food is good or bad. It's just a question of, is it aligned with what your goals are? And if you are somebody who is looking to lose weight, is it going to keep you full for a long time? Because you can lose weight eating nothing but Doritos and pizza, but you're not going to be eating very much food, and you're probably going to be a lot more hungry, versus if you eat more chicken breast and potatoes, you're going to lose weight and maybe not be quite so hungry. It just was so pragmatic. I really appreciated it. What did you think of that whole philosophy? Is it aligned with what you do?
Oh man, yeah, there's a lot of good in this nutrition story, because I think it just it's like research is context, but it just proves this real specific point. And then but there's broad frameworks of understanding, and there is real.
Mhm.
Like there is real. Like not everything is a theory or a thought.
Yeah.
There's these principles that start to come out across themes of understanding. And I think if you don't align with principles, your methods are madness. So when you don't like carnivore, going vegan, just tracking macros, just tracking calories, there's all these things that you could do inherently to have good nutritional strategies. And lots of them have some stuff in principle that could work well. But if you're not aligning with the principles, then your method's madness.
Yeah.
And I think with the nutrition one, this dude just got a good head on his shoulders. Like it's like you've inferred principles and a very, very good understanding, and then you've aligned those your own methods with those principles, and then you've hit a bunch of different people with them and started to do your own little research. And I think as you become a good professional, you start doing your own research and you see what's common, what works between groups. And it's like, so something like calories isn't a theory, it's
Mm.
thermodynamics. Like
Yeah.
energy can't be created or destroyed, it is only transformed. So it doesn't matter if you have a freaking thyroid issue or not. If I put you in a concentration camp, you're going to get smaller and you're going to slowly waste away because you can't break the principle of thermodynamics. So this plays in all types of goals. Whether you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to get leaner, you're trying to gain muscle, you have to use these principles of thermodynamics. What I really like is a couple different things from him in his central philosophy is that there's no bad foods,
Mm.
but there is improper use of the tools. And then so one of the things he goes into is the research on satiety,
Mhm.
and that the volume of the food correlates 1-in-1 to the volume and the weight of the food correlates 1-in-1 to somebody's satiety over time. And if you're
Yeah.
not sure what satiety, it's just how full you've stayed over time. And so if you ate what's it called, like 100 grams of fuzzy peaches, then that's going to get you a lot hungrier in an hour than 100 grams of white potato. And white potato was one of the highest volume and weights of the foods. But this also can kind of touch on a paradigm that he didn't go over, and that's the glycemic index.
Mm.
So you could have a bag of fuzzy peaches, and that's going to have an immediate effect on your blood sugar, and you're going to have an increase in blood sugar and insulin, and then you're also going to have a subsequent crash, which is not only going to correlate to how full you were, but also your relative blood sugar and how the energy systems are playing out for you. And so I like these two tools because you have volume of food for satiety, and then you have glycemic index and an understanding of energy. And then that could play out to a whole bunch of different things. But I really liked his concept around when he was coaching people. There was no bad foods, but you're going to learn. You're going to eat 2,000 calories, and you go out and you fill that void with whatever you want, and you're going to find out real quick that I could eat like Canadian Team Canada, I could eat like an A&W Grandpa burger with a set of onion rings. That's 700 calories for the Grandpa burger and 500 calories for the onion rings. I've hit 1,200 calories right there one meal. I could have that, and that's consumed in 30 minutes. So I really like one, making them learn the principle. So if you eat the more processed hypercaloric food, you're going to get hungrier faster, and you're going to have to deal with more hunger. But then it goes another layer. I like the micronutrient playover,
Mm.
where you can eat whatever you want. But if you start being devoid of certain micronutrients, your body's going to start to push signals to get that food in, or hunger, or a couple other things, but it's going to keep pushing things. Your body knows what you just put into it. You couldn't eat a vat. Okay, sure, you ate a vat of broccoli. Okay, you're going to be really full, but you're going to be starting to be devoid of certain micro and macronutrients. And so I really like thinking of nutrition from tools. And that's what I really like this story. It wasn't going carnivore, going vegan,
Yeah.
or macros or micros and any sort of framework. It was just using the right tools. And if you understand the tools, then your methods are sound. But if you don't have the right tools and you're not aligned with principles, your methods are going to be madness. What I really liked about it in a sum is I liked the volume
Mm.
in relation to satiety, And then I liked in order to the food strategies and how he would coach people. But then this is going to also then side quest a little bit back to the modern landscape is you can't intuitively eat
Mm.
because your system is not in a good place for the modern food environment. And we have two main hormones. We have leptin, ghrelin. And what's really interesting is you can't get ghrelin resistant because ghrelin makes you hungry. So your body's not got a not good advantage to try to dial that down over time. We like, okay, we got over food. We're going to dial it down. We don't need a lot of food. You're not hungry. But it needs to spike that again because you might starve. Leptin, that's on another continuum. Leptin makes you full. You can get leptin resistant. So if you're constantly overeating, you can get resistant to leptin, and now you're not going to have good signals to your own satiety. So if you've disrupted your leptin production, you're going to constantly eat more food than you believe you should, and you can't intuitively eat. Your system's broken. And then if we push on to the research side of this, we know that people will, on average, eat more than 1,000 calories than what they report they've eaten. So if you're eating 1,000 calories per day, that's 7,000 calories per week, and that's 2 pounds approximately of fat over 1 week that could be stored.
Crazy.
And then so the modern environment is a little bit more hostile to nutrition than the past environment. That doesn't mean we just all of a sudden need to start fasting and go out and kill your own elk and fast over that period, then eat the elk and to get this system back condition. But what it does mean is you got to understand that you can overeat and get more accustomed to overeating. That ghrelin is not related to how much your nutritional needs are. It's more related to the volume of food consumption.
Mm.
It's a really big point. So that means you could be theoretically eating quite a bit, being devoid of micronutrients, and you could basically continue to overeat and then intuitively think that you're not overeating because ghrelin's being pushed up, and then you've had a high volume of food. You've gotten resistant to leptin, which then means you don't really pick up on that you're eating too much food, but ghrelin can still get spiked. You go on a deficit and you cut that gap. Well, then ghrelin's going to spike in relation to how much food you were consuming and not your actual nutritional requirements. So anytime you're going in a deficit, you're going to have to embrace hunger. This is a necessary evil. And like even myself, like I've been going through cutting and massing cycles over a decade, and it's not like I'm not tolerant or that I don't feel hunger because of good strategies. Every time I cut, I'm hungry. That's the necessary evil. So when we have this modern environment is hostile towards our own food signals, and then we've gotten to a point where we've got more deconditioned to our own food signals, and that hunger is a necessary, I would say, a necessary principle of life, not just cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And this plays out into a couple different things. I'm going to just say this fasting thing is that you don't have to all of a sudden start intermediately fasting to have cell turnover.
No.
If you just go into a deficit, you're going to be fine.
Exactly. Extreme 72-hour fasts are not necessary for autophagy. You can achieve that.
Just throw yourself in a deficit. Just eat less than your energy you're putting out over time.
Yeah.
But I think sort of long concept short is that our modern food environment, I think, is very hostile to what would be high qualities of life in relation to sort of I don't know, like the system. It's like the car. Like we're seeing a massive increase in obesity, and obesity was a national epidemic a decade ago, and it's only gotten worse. And I think one of the largest pinpoints to this is the modern food environment in relation to our hunger signals, but then also specifically people's aversion to hunger because it's not as common. We're just not, then that doesn't mean we need to go back to a modern time to solve this problem. It just means that we should actually probably embrace times of fasting, not necessarily like a time of multiple days, like just a caloric deficit. That's
Mhm.
fasting. If you just go into a caloric deficit and you stop eating at 9 p.m. and you wake up at 7 a.m., you've just done a fast. So, okay, we fasted over the night and we have a deficit in, okay, we've gotten hungry and then we've gotten accustomed to that hunger signal. Okay, we're in a good place to handle the modern environment now. We don't need to go out on a 30-day fast to lose weight.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, there's real benefits in having experiences where we are at a calorie deficit or fast a little bit or allow ourselves to be a little bit hungry because in modern food climate, people seldom have to be hungry. Again, with the exceptions of people who live in food deserts or who have food insecurity in their lives. But many people have become really intolerant of feeling hungry because they so rarely have to feel hungry. It feels like, oh, something is wrong. And it's like, actually, no, there's nothing wrong with you to feel hungry. And there's lots of good traditions around this as well. Like
Mm,
I mean, the folks who are doing the research about like intermittent fasting and even longer periods of fasting, you get down the rabbit hole of the internet on those topics. And it's like, people become like true believers real quick. Like it almost becomes
mhm,
cultish in terms of how people talk about it. But like back the heck up a little bit. There's lots of across human history examples of traditions in cultures where people fast for periods of time. You look at
mhm,
Muslims fast during Ramadan. Every time Ramadan comes around, they are fasting
mhm,
from sunrise to sunset. And I just think about like culturally, there's something about humans over the years have kind of understood there's some value in having periods where you let yourself be hungry, that hunger, even though it's uncomfortable, there's something functional about letting yourself be hungry. Um, and so, and I know for myself, like probably a decade ago, got onto that train of like, oh, intermittent fasting, that's what I need to do. If I could just intermittent fast, then that's going to fix my wagon and I'll finally lose all this weight. That didn't happen. But I will say this, what did happen with intermittent fasting is that it did let me get comfortable with feeling hungry and realizing
mhm,
that it wasn't going to kill me. And that, like there were times when you were eating all the time and eating a really crappy diet, when you get hungry, sometimes that hunger is associated with like drops in blood sugar. Because I think when your body is not accustomed to ever being hungry, it maybe gets bad. And there was some research, I don't know how good the quality of the research is, but I think for some people who have metabolic disorder, I think one of the things that is part of that is that when you get hungry, if your body's not accustomed to accessing its own fat stores for fuel, you will get hypoglycemic sometimes. So I think there's also maybe this like exposure and building up tolerance and kind of training your systems to get reacquainted with how do I access this stored fat again? I've never had to do this before. How do I do that? Um, and then that has served me well in terms of then being able to, yeah, just I don't even like calling it a diet. It's a diet in the sense of like I am eating in ways that are consistent with my goals. And sometimes that is at
mhm,
maintenance or at a surplus, and sometimes it's in a deficit depending on what my goals are at the time. Um,
mm,
and so yeah, just being in tune with your hunger, I think is functional. Not the least of which is because like it used to be that when I was really overweight and was not in touch with my hunger, like for me, if I got hungry, that would be like I was hangry. There was a crisis. Like I was mad about it. And it felt like it just got so overwhelming that it's like I need to fix this problem before I could possibly do anything else. And it's like now I'm just like, yeah, I can be hungry. It's fine. I'll
mm.
have another meal in a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, gluconeogenesis.
Yeah.
This is, I think, another one of the principles is that you get efficient at what you do. And then so if you're constantly pumping yourself, full of sugar, your body's gonna actually get more adept at using, blood sugar in relation to energy, and is gonna be efficient at, using glucose. But then what you'll do is you jam the system up so much that you start to affect how insulin is regulated. And just a good thing for people's simple understanding is you imagine insulin is like a key that opens your cell. Glucose is the blood sugar and it's the energy, and then insulin allows the energy to get into the cell to actually affect change and produce energy. And then so what'll happen is you're constantly pumping yourself full of simple sugars. You'll start to affect your blood sugar, and you'll start to affect how efficiently insulin is regulated in your body. But one of the things here is a lot of times when people haven't gone through times of, say, fasting or cutting or caloric deficits, is you just get really inefficient at using triglycerides for energy. And
Hmm.
then so your body takes three fatty acids, it pulls the glycerol molecule off, and then it can create glucose out of fat molecules. One of the things I like, he sort of discusses in the fasting portion of this is the use of ketones. I don't like that framework because ketones and ketosis is trying to put yourself into a pretty technical world when you don't have training wheels.
Yeah.
If we just like, okay, all right, why do you want to use your ketones? It's like, what do you want? Okay, you want to get leaner? Okay, sweet. How about we first try a caloric deficit and you don't start dropping all carbs out of your body when you're a system that is used to just getting consistent carb influx, where we know that people who have low carb diets, on the research side, have a much harder time with intense exercise adherence, because
Hmm.
when you're not used to utilizing fat as energy, it's not as efficient. Your body's not particularly happy about it, and it gives you feedback. Your blood sugar's low, and it doesn't know how to keep the blood sugar up. Okay, all right. Okay, so you want to get leaner. You don't have any training wheels for nutrition. Let's pump you into the most hostile environment for that, for you in your perception of difficulty. It's oh my god. But what I like about the nutrition, the nutrition chapter, which connects into this, is it's just principle derived. It's
Yes.
just like, these are these simple things you can do. You learn the tools, and now you can have that fucking pizza on Friday night. You just are going to suffer for it, and you have to be hungry. That's just what's going to happen. And it's funny because when I think about this, I do this all the time. Like today, just like 2 hours ago, I ate a 1,700 calorie breakfast because, you know what? I got to run today. I got the podcast. I don't want to eat 7 times. I want to eat 2 times. And that's what's going to happen. I'm going to hit all my macros and my calories in 2 meals. Does that mean I'm going to hit 110 grams of protein per meal? Hell yeah, I'm going to hit that. And it doesn't matter so much my protein dose over the day. It's
Mm.
like the big things matter. Like, we
Yeah.
will so easily step over dollars for pennies when it comes to nutrition. And I think there's just so much like, it's illogical, and that's what goes into that was my rant. But my main theme on what you said is there's just these ideological beliefs with
Yes.
what would be the proper nutrition standpoint. And it's like, I don't care if you fast, I don't care if you're carnivore, I care a little bit if you're vegan, because you're it's the same thing. You're slamming yourself into a hard technical environment without a lot of technical skills, and you're going to be devoid of key nutrients. That's a fact. And you're
Mm.
going to have to work extra hard to get those nutrients. And then you're also going to be eating proportionately more carbohydrates. So if you're not doing a lot of intense exercise, you're kind of setting yourself up for a not very hostile environment. It
Mm.
doesn't mean that you can't be successful. It's just a lot of people try to go on these drastic things, like you in say fasting, before you learn the tools of exercise. It's like, okay, cool, or nutrition. Okay, cool. We learned how to fast, and we got rewards from that with how well you were able to tolerate hunger.
Mhm.
But then what you see on the nutritional interventions is that most people will end up heavier than when they started.
Mm.
Last concept in the nutrition chapter is just, there are no bad foods. If you
Yeah.
start demonizing foods, then you're just going to be a child who got their hand caught in the cookie jar, and you're going to want to get back to the cookie jar. So it's like, oh, okay, this period. All right, 6 weeks, I'm going carnivore, cutting out carbs. Cool. All right, we lost 10 pounds. We're feeling great. Life's good. Okay, and then all of a sudden, the repercussions of the associated environment neurologically, and just how you have learned, like whatever maybe your dynamic around food and your relationships, dinner, certain things. You've been eating your freaking prepped food container, but your family is eating that pie over there, and every night you have to sit there and look at it. And so if you don't create a strategy that's a life sentence, you're going to put yourself up for failure. And
Mhm.
then in the nutrition chapter, it really creates a good tool set without an ideology around what is the best method.
Yeah.
Just these are the principles that you should probably learn, and then you're going to be able to be quite effective here. And then if it goes along, sorry, on your if with your question, I really like the food chapter
Yeah.
because of that specifically. I agree with you. I think it's one of the better nutrition pieces of literature I've read because it relates to the principles of nutrition and not an ideology.
Yeah. It's a really fantastic, like, practical tools and, like you say, a non-ideological approach to it. So in that, because it's general principles, for once, it's a chapter about nutrition that really can apply to everybody, no matter what your goals are, whether you're trying to gain weight or lose weight. Like, here's a sensible approach to understanding food and your body's response to it. I just really liked
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, and if you don't understand macronutrients and you don't understand, it's calories, macronutrients. Okay, let's go on this. Calories, thermodynamics. Pretty good to understand. Macros, large nutrients that you need in large amounts. So play that again. Nutrients you need in large amounts. So cutting out one of the macronutrients for no fucking reason is illogical.
Yeah.
And then it goes micronutrients. And then I would say under that, it moves into certain understandings. Like I think then you go like glycemic index and
Hmm.
volume of food over weight.
Well, I think too, that's where, like, for anybody listening to this who wants to do carnivore or keto or eat vegan, absolutely do that. But that's advanced level skills. Nail down the
Mm-hmm.
basics first and then see if you want to incorporate those. And if you do want to try and experiment with those to see, I'm who am I to say that there might be individuals out there for whom that is the healthier choice? But I don't think many people will be successful if that's where they try and start. I think that there's some foundational pieces um, that are more important and that need to be there, and that often make then those highly specialized kind of diets unnecessary for your goals. However, I'll give the caveat that, like, say, for example, if somebody wants to be vegan for ethical reasons, yes, you can absolutely meet your nutritional goals and follow your own personal ethics. But in terms of being successful with that, so that it's not just my ethics, it's also that I'm meeting my nutritional goals, you need to have some of those foundation pieces too.
Yeah. And I would say you got to understand the playing field. So if you want to align with an ethical belief on what's right or wrong, you got to understand if you don't go into it with the right tools, you're going to be sacrificing your long-term health for that ethical reason. And you got to decide what is worth it there. And then you got to go in with the right tools to make sure that you're not starving yourself over time and not getting key macro and micronutrients. And then there's going to be some people that function just better on certain things. Like there is groups that function a bit better on mobilizing fat as energy
Mhm.
than using energy carbs as a substrate for energy or glucose, which is really interesting that you just have this evolutionary development that would make you better at utilizing fat as energy. And that's about 1/3 of the population. So whether you're vegan or you're carnivore or you're doing your macros or calories, some people might be a little bit better with a higher fat consumption than a higher carb consumption, but it's going to be a lower amount.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that translates pretty well into one of my favorite topics of this book. I would say probably my favorite is the misogi. I loved the misogi. The misogi is a sort of the utilizing the power of intentional hardship, and a misogi is a older Japanese tradition, and it encompasses the deliberate pursuit of an extreme challenge
Mm.
that you're not guaranteed to be successful in. And Michael makes the claim that it reveals how capable we truly are, but it also, he talks about how it correlates into a couple other things like our self-belief and the trials we're willing to undertake because we've challenged our comfort. What does the misogi mean to you? And is there any things in your life that would you'd say fall under the Misogi principle that have had a large impact on you?
For the misogi, it's interesting. I really liked the idea of it. I think I had to reflect a little bit on it because I think some of my experiences have been through less extreme forms of exposure to very difficult things than he necessarily described in the book. When he talks about misogi, he kind of explained it, what the tradition of it is, but then went on to elaborate to how he and the people he spoke to were applying it. And they were talking about some very extreme, longer term um, endeavors. And I don't relate to that piece of
Mm,
it, but I also don't think that those are the only examples of misogi. Like in terms of talking about the tradition of it, that's not really what it's about. Um,
mm,
to elaborate just on what that tradition is, he talks about how there's this story about how um, a guy went into the underworld to save a loved one and then realized he needed to escape from the underworld, and that in order to not bring back the taint of the underworld, he
mm,
had to bathe himself in this cold water. And so then that has borne out into, there's a tradition among some groups of monks of then exposing themselves to cold water. So whether it's plunging in a cold water, I think the more traditional path is to sit on a rock under a freezing cold waterfall, and that's what a misogi is exposing yourself to that. So that misogi is also not about like a 1 month trip to Alaska.
mhm,
It is a shorter thing, and I do really relate to that. I like the idea of that when we expose ourselves to things that are stressful, and I there's something appealing to about the idea of like a cold water plunge that I just
mhm,
really love. Um, that I think can be really like um clarifying and cleansing, and it's also like it challenges you to show you that like you can do hard things.
mhm,
You can do something that like your primitive brain will be screaming at you like, what are we doing? Stop doing this. This is a bad idea. And that you can override that and make a choice to choose to move into that. Where I think there's real value in doing practicing things like that challenge us to override what our primitive instinct says and instead make a conscious choice to do something difficult, is that there are some things in life that require us to really apply ourselves and um, override the internal thoughts that are saying, "Ooh, that's risky," or "I'm not sure I'm going to succeed," or like, "I don't know if that's a good idea." But sometimes we need to be able to do those things in service of a goal. And so I think there's real value in practicing misogi in some kind of way. I think that for myself, like I have done things like polar bear plunges. I have done things like gone like bungee jumping, which like, yeah, in modern times, it's probably pretty safe, but that's not how it feels when you're standing up at the top of the platform about to dive. Like,
mhm,
and then I would put on the list for me, misogi is also about doing some things that are actually not about physical, but they do feel uh, existentially as threatening. Like, um, for myself, I am an occupational therapist now, but this wasn't my first career. I had a whole career. I had a home, I had a mortgage, I had,
mhm,
a pension plan, and I was profoundly unhappy. And I walked away from all of it. I sold my home, I cashed out my pension plan, I sold my car, and I went back to school because I wanted to do something different. And I just
mhm,
was on a mission that I wanted my life to be different from how it was. And I think that it was through my willingness to, I think, practice in small ways of like, sometimes you just got to be all in on something, all in, give it your focus and make a big change. And then after I graduated, I then did it again. I wanted to work in mental health, and I'm from Southern Ontario. I wanted to work in mental health, and there were no mental health jobs in that area, but I could get a job that was my dream job if I was willing to move across the country to Alberta. I had
mhm,
never been to Alberta before, but I applied for the job. I got it. And my first time coming to Alberta was when I moved across the country to a city where I knew no one. I had never been to the city before, and started over. And at the time, like, people would tell me, like, when I tell that story, people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so brave." And I'm just like, it didn't feel brave. It felt scary, but it also felt really purposeful. Like, it felt necessary in terms of, uh, it's something that was important to me. And I
Mm,
see so much about how people stay stuck in places in their life because they're so risk averse, or I guess maybe have so few times where they have really pushed themselves out way outside their comfort zones in service of a purposeful goal, that people will shy away from, I think, achieving their full potential because they're afraid to let go of what's comfortable. And I can see there that's the
mm.
value of the misogi, is it gives people practice with that. Now, I know you've had more experience with more traditional, maybe misogis, at least traditional in terms of how Michael Easter was talking about them. So what are your thoughts on misogi?
Mm. I really liked all the things you went over there
Mm.
because I think it's the premise is almost like a cleansing of the internal doubt that you can do hard things through some sort of thing that's directly intentionally uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And I think that's the premise. He goes more into like he's talking to the one guy about sort of taking on a challenge that is like maybe you have a 2/3 chance being successful at, and he this is it's funny, this is one of the stuff I did not like. I did not like the almost like the romanticization of the African indigenous challenge of sending the male to go kill a lion and and come back like, yeah, okay, for this tribe, fuck yeah. Like the person that comes back from that is a legend. Salute to you. But the idea, and he was is this guy is doing the marathon, basically the rim to rim Grand Canyon, and I can't remember exactly how long it was, and he said he had barely run 10K, and then he just rams into this thing. I hate that. Like, if you want to develop patellar tendonitis and and maybe blow out your meniscus, do that. Like, don't run 10 kilometers and then go try to run 100 and and watch the year of recovery that it takes to recover from that. But in a lot of ways, he discusses the principle well. I just think almost in some ways misinterprets it.
Hmm.
Like the guy he talks to is just his own look at it.
Yeah.
When the misogi of standing under a cold waterfall was the tradition.
Mm.
And so the tradition was causing some sort of external stimuli that was directly uncomfortable and doing it anyway because of the value that would then be received from being able to tolerate that intentional stress. And then I like that because that can branch into a whole bunch of different things. I really like your example because I think it falls into that premise because it's like, okay, all right, you know what? This ain't it. I'm gonna go that way. I don't know how it's gonna work out, but full send. And it's like I think in a lot of ways that does play out into the misogi. And kind of I have two things that I think, well, a couple different things because I would say more of my experience with it is cold exposure.
Mm.
I that is something, and I really do see a lot of value in that. And I'll talk about that. And then a couple of life things for me that played out. I think the life way, just because your tangent was on it. One of the things that for my landscape is I moved around a lot when I was a kid. I had a very, very unpredictable environment. It's like this rent was too expensive and they got a place here. We're staying at a friend's house or grandma's place. It's like we're always moving
Mm.
around. And what it did is it built this real nasty association with moving.
Mm.
And for a lot of my life, every time I've moved, I really have to deal with some very powerful internal stress. I get like 10 out of 10 anxious, and it just it's like I'm on fire for a couple days. And one of the first times I I moved away from my home environment. I moved to Williams Lake to play basketball when I was in grade 11, and I was stuck in my room for 3 days because it was so bad. And
Mm.
I just kind of leaned into it. I didn't need to go home. I kind of had already built the association that I needed to make it through this to be successful. But it always plagued me. And then I got this opportunity to go 12,000 miles away and live in New Zealand for a while. And I knew I was going to have a hard time with that. It was just like, I knew it was going to be a problem. Like, it was like, I don't exactly even know. I wasn't sure about the financial aspects of it. I wasn't for sure, like, sure how I would handle a move like that. There was a lot of personal dynamics that were kind of not great with a move like that. But I knew that going to New Zealand for 6 months would change my life.
Yeah.
It's just like the environment I was in. My mom had passed away, and I'd started to move away from bodybuilding, and I was kind of in this halfway point where I didn't really exactly know what some endeavors were going to go from there. And so I said, hell yeah, let's go live in New Zealand. And I had a total meltdown. Like, the first 3 days
Oh.
I was there, I didn't sleep, total meltdown. But the amount of value I got from that, plunging myself intentionally into a stimuli that I knew was going to make me very, very uncomfortable, really burned away some of that association.
Mm.
When I move, I still get like, it stresses me out and I still feel anxiety, but it's not the same. That move purged some of my anxiety around moving, which I think was really interesting because it aligns with the concept really well, which I like with your concept too. It's like you purged yourself with a stress that was not like what you were dealing with in order to gain some sort of advantage from it. Little side quest on cold exposure. I really like cold exposure
Mm.
for that intentional aspect because, okay, cool. Dopamine levels over the day. Awesome. Dopamine resetting. Cool. Not great for recovery. Like, let's just get that out of here. It's like you don't need it to recover, and it's not really going to help you that much. And it might even in some ways blunt hypertrophy responses, but that can be another discussion for just that being unpleasant and you freaking putting your ass in it. I think has such value. It's like making your bed. It's
Mm.
like, say if you do cold, I really like cold exposure in the morning
Mm.
because it's like I just ram into something that I don't want to do. I would never want to do. I feel better after. And it's like I started the day with the win, like a big win. But one of the things I really like to do is actually like polar plunges when I'm in the mountains.
Mm.
Like, if I can get into and jump into a glaciated lake and just like, and I like to sit there until I feel like I can't, like until like I'm starting to see, like feel like things start to shut down a little bit. And it's like a little side quest of a thing about me is I love that.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm in the mountains, if I can jump in a glaciated lake, it's just different. It's like I think it really reflects to that standing under the waterfall. It's
Mhm.
like it was a long day, maybe it's night, and it's not like, okay, maybe I'll wash some sweat off, but it's like I purged myself till the next mountain endeavor. And there's something about cold exposure that's really interesting because we just have so many, I don't know, like almost negative beliefs in our society now where it's like it's snowing out and okay, all right, it's a bad day. Like, or it's cold out and it's a bad day, or it's like I need to bundle up so much that I can't experience that cold. And with the glaciated lake purges, one of the things I've gotten recently in the last 2 years actually is doing more related mountain endeavors in winter.
Mm.
And I think that's been really interesting because, yeah, cool, you got awesome gear, but you're still cold. Like, it's a nasty day. You're cold for 12 hours and you need to have the right gear because you don't want to have any consequences. We don't want to lose fingers.
Yeah.
But even if you have the right gear, you're cold all day and you're just doing summer hikes is not the same thing as winter hikes, or when you cross over into like mountaineering endeavors where it's always winter after you pass a certain elevation. And one of the things that made me realize is just how many limiting beliefs we have just on some sort of thought about the external environment. Like, just like, oh, it's cold outside, so we should bundle up so much and get the car started, and so it's warm, and so I can go from my warm bed to the warm car to the warm work environment. And I found since I've been doing some of the cold exposure things is almost an opposite, where it's like I'll go for a walk and I purposely don't dress for the weather. I'm like, I just want to be cold on this walk. I want to feel it. And then the winter endeavor. Oh, I know I'm going to be cold. I'm going to keep my fingers, but I'm going to be cold, and it's going to be a cool experience. Or I know I'm going to really like start shivering in this glaciated lake, but I'm going to do it anyway because I see some value on my experience on the other side. And cold exposure, like, I don't know what it's been. It actually has made a pretty big impact on just how I think about those immediate stressors. Like, just like, even just like thinking about, man, I'm tired. I don't want to do this task. Oh, okay, no, but I know I'm going to be better off after it. Let's just do it. 5 minutes. And I think for cold exposure, especially like cold water, I think it's had a tangible impact on that little barrier. It's like, say you're in a warm bed and you're like, okay, all right, I gotta get up. And you just like, you fire out of bed. I think there has been a tangible effect on my life in relation to applied cold exposure. Do you have any thoughts on the cold exposure?
Yeah, because in terms of like what it trains us to be able to do is that it's a perfect microcosm of where like your little primitive brain is like, don't do it, don't do it. That's a bad idea. Don't do it. And being able to override the part of your brain that is saying no with the reasonable part of your brain that is like, we're doing it. I'm done listening to you. So like I think about my most recent experience with it was going in mid-October to my brother's place where he's got a wood-fired sauna, and then we all go run into the lake, which is about 4 degrees. So not freezing, but like it's pretty cold.
But still cold. Yeah.
And so like we'll get real hot in the sauna and then go run. And the thing that I just chant to myself the whole way from the sauna down to the lake is like, don't think, don't think, don't think, don't think. And I just keep repeating it over and over to myself until I run into the water and get in. And then I'm just focused on breathing, because I think that sometimes our thoughts are not our friends. Our thoughts are filled with self-limiting beliefs and fears, and they will talk us out of many things that are really good for us. And so I see the cold water exposure as just, it is a micro moment to practice overriding your brain when your brain is not actually serving, when your brain's not pulling for the team goal. How do you override the voice and just do it anyway? So I like cold water exposure for that.
Yeah. It's funny, the little side quest of a story, but like when I first started getting back into the mountains, I always had this impulse to like jump in these random lakes, like these cold lakes, and I always wanted to do it, but I always didn't do it because I'd be driving home and I'd be like that looks like a lake that I might come out with like superpowers or something. But it's green. I gotta get to work. Like it's like and I would just let it go. And then what it's like this I remember it's interesting actually. I guess it was like kind of after the ALS stuff with the genetic testing. I remember that next time I was in the mountains, there was this, makes me emotional I think about it. There was this one lake that is just really green, and I always wanted to jump in it. And it was like it was actually before I started at Good Life, the very next mountain trip, I jumped in that fucking lake and I felt great after.
Amazing.
And it then ever since, I don't compromise on that little desire to jump in the lake. And I think we're so easy to just let some sort of childish whim go because there's some reason not to do it. Like just like okay, you got to get to work. You'd have to get a towel. Oh, maybe your partner wouldn't want to do that. Oh, maybe that's too much time. Oh, you know what? It's just like, maybe I don't want to do. Like it's almost like you'll second guess yourself out of things you want to do to almost protect yourself of the stress of overcoming it or something like that. But I remember that this specific story connected with this cold exposure, and I don't do that anymore. It's like
Cool.
when I freaking want to jump in that lake, I jump in the lake. But the last thing on the Misogi that it made me think of is more of the book concept,
Mm,
is this physical challenge that is hard.
mm.
I don't believe it should be like, that's what I don't like. Physical challenges can have costs.
Yes.
You can damage things, and doesn't mean you're not going to heal. It's just maybe it's not really fully necessary, and you should just pick a challenge, train for it, and overcome it, and guaranteed overcome it.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be something that you could maybe, oh, maybe it has to be this ultra marathon run and I could blow up my fucking feet. That doesn't make any sense. Or what if it's a marathon? What if I have a year to prepare and I need to hold on to a 2-time-a-week running frequency for a whole freaking year? And I
Yeah.
need to have a good progression. I need to get up to a weekly volume of kilometers that is equal to the run, and I'm going to guarantee I'm going to do it. But when I make this quest, I could not do it.
Yeah.
Like, it would be like, or there would be a cost to it. What I don't like about his painting of it is I think it's not fully, it's not really connected to the modern Misogi, or the traditional Misogi, and it's sort of almost like this masochistic test. And it's like, okay, I like some physical challenge as much as everybody, but I also haven't liked the injuries I've had, and running repetitive injuries can be freaking nasty. You don't want to damage your meniscus. And what I like about what I like about the idea of the Misogi is picking a task that you don't know is fully doable, and then doing the steps to overcome it. Because then when you come out on the other side, you are different. You didn't try to do one random quest to make yourself feel
Yes.
better. It's like you could just do a cold exposure to help yourself with that little self-doubt, and then you can create this freaking war plan. But over this war plan, you'll become something new. And then by the time you get to this new timestamp, you're consistently something different. Maybe some obstacles could play out that it didn't fully get done per se, but then it was process driven and not outcome driven. And I think that's a much better Misogi strategy. This sort of uncomfortable, intentional physical stress, and then in relation to this maybe long term, or like this uncomfortable sort of external stimuli test, like cold water, over this long term physical objective, or sort of like your quest, sending it to a whole new lifetime. It's like, it was that you can't just be this thing. There was like a long term trajectory to get to this thing. But
Mhm.
what you got on the other side of that was much different than if you just had ran a freaking marathon, blown your knee out.
Exactly. And like, I found it, this is one of my problems with the book, is I found it a little disingenuous because he talked to the one guy about Misogi, and the guy who he spoke to, I can't remember the fella's name, but he said there's only 2 rules to Misogi, or 3, I guess. Is rule number 1 is that you have to pick something that's so hard that you maybe only have a 50% chance of being able to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Rule 2 is don't die. And then rule 3 is that you don't post about it on social media, that it's not for other people, it's something you do for yourself. But inherent is like you say, it's about like, you're picking something you know you're going to fail at, and the only rule is don't die. But there's like a whole chasm of like injuries and failure that could still meet those criteria. And yet then when Mr. Easter went and crafted his own Misogi of taking this hunting trip up to Alaska for a month, he did all kinds of preparation. He consulted with experts. He went out hunting with them in another location to make sure that they knew their stuff. He took all kinds of courses. He got all kinds of gear. Like, he was well prepared. And even going up there, he went with 2 experts who had done this many times before successfully. They had an emergency radio that they could call for help if they needed to. So it's like, he romanticizes the Misogi, talks about it in a really extreme way that's disconnected from the tradition, and that's also disconnected from what he actually did.
No, I agree, because a large premise of the book contradicted proper coaching strategies, and I didn't like that, because the sending people out to things that they're unsure of going to be successful in breaks people who already failed 1,000 times, because it's just one more failure and they don't think they can do it. Standing in cold water, you can
You could do that.
frickin' do it.
Yes.
Like, you're bitching out right now, but you could do it. You could get in that cold shower. I know you can. You could do it, and it'll give you a good return on your investment. You don't have to do it every morning, but get in that cold shower, and I know you could do it. Then part two is just it's like he did all the things necessary. He had experience in it, which gave him preparation.
Mhm.
And over that experience, he developed a belief that this task could be doable, which then gave him the self-belief in it, or the self-efficacy in the matter. And then he sent out on the task that was guaranteed to be successful, because he went with people that were competent in it. And if you did that task, you may die if you weren't prepared for it. Like, it's
Yes.
actually likely that you will die. Like, there's a lot of the, like, slight mountaineering objectives could KO you if you don't understand, you don't have a freaking GPS map and you're wearing the right clothes,
Yeah.
let alone just fucking off to Alaska for a whole month, and relying on the kill to survive the month in a way. But then it broke some of my coaching brain thinking on the matter. But what I did really like was the traditional misogi,
Hmm.
and then how I would imagine a better misogi, from more realistic parameters, to actually develop people that are better at tolerating uncomfortable, and being successful in physical endeavors, that will then help them being successful in their mental endeavors. Because the belief you get in yourself from overcoming hard physical challenges, and that's what I'll talk about here quickly, is there's one specifically that I like to bring to mind, and it's a central theme to how far I can take myself physically and what that's done for me, because I wasn't always this thing. Like, it's like I wasn't this. I was a normal person. Like, I struggled with freaking exercise and studying and like going to work, getting up, and I still do. But somewhere around the last show, so it was the last bodybuilding show, I'd gone through a pretty hard prep. I had stopped sleeping. My
Hmm.
neurological stress had gone so high that my the stress of the endeavor was starting to affect my recovery protocols, and it wasn't going to get any better.
Hmm.
Like, I wasn't going to be able to. I'm not that far out, and if I don't keep up with this pace, I'm not going to get where I wanted to be. So
Hmm.
that resting for a couple days was not an option. It's like, I'm, you know, 2 weeks out. I need to keep dropping this weight, but it was a particular nasty week. It's like I was I was involved in school work, and I didn't sleep that night, and I'd probably gotten an hour or two sleep over the last like 7 days. And I was, over these 7 days, I was consuming 1,200 calories and putting out a 5,500 calorie estimate of work output. And in this line, okay, we're talking about tools and nutrition, I was doing 60 minutes of morning cardio fasted, and I was doing 60 minutes of evening cardio, and then I was doing probably about, roughly, it would take an hour and a half, 2 hours of resistance training. So I'm spending
Wow.
a good 3-4 hours of training every single day on a 1,200 calorie intake. And it was a pretty rough morning, and I was not feeling good. Oh man, this is probably the worst I ever felt in my life. Like, I got out of that bed, and like my eyes were swollen. Like, I could see the puffy under my eyes. I said, "Hey, like, we're real close. Like, we're real close." And I remember it's like 4:30 in the morning, and I'm just struggle bust down to get to. I had my coffee, didn't do shit. Like, it was like, that didn't do nothing. And I get onto this elliptical, and I was just like, it was the worst I'd ever felt in my life. I was just like, this is so bad. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this. I got class in 2 hours. I was just like, it was like all these reasons of why I couldn't do it were coming into my head. And I just was like, I had this thought. I was like, yeah, but what if I did this until I died? Like, it sounds hardcore, but I was like, what if I did this until I fucking died? And I was like, well, I don't know. Could I go here for 5 hours, 6, 12? Like, do I make it all day? Like, if I just like, there was no no limiter in my brain, how long could I do this low intensity cardio? And it just like, I got so motivated with that idea. And I just like, I hit that cardio and I didn't miss a cardio for the next like 6 days. And then on the seventh day, I didn't have to do my evening stairmaster because I hit my goal weight. That was like the best day ever. Like that. I didn't have to do 60 minutes. Like, oh man. But it's like that was a real level Masogi
Mm.
for the person I became.
Mm.
That would destroy people. That like if you tried to push somebody who didn't have a decade of physical training underneath their belt, they're getting all kinds of negative associations with exercise. Like they're having a horrible time, and then they're going to affect their pattern of behavior for life and their associations around exercise. But for me, in that moment, that was a source of power that I could have not derived from anything else in the universe. Like nothing would have had me so tired and so hungry and so exhausted, and that I would have done those things anyway.
Mm.
And that turned me into a whole different thing. But that was a proportionate challenge for the creature that I had became. You can shut up.
Yeah.
But that's the highlight of the physical Masogi. But the problem with this is you can destroy people,
Mm.
and like the stress can kill the organism, and with people it's not always death. It can be bad associations, injuries, and the amount that the Masogi could do for you is magnificent, but it has to be a proportionate challenge. And if it's a little one like jumping in cold water, you can in fact do it. You don't need any preparation. I highly recommend. But if it's a physical one, you need to prepare for it, and you want to set a challenge that I believe is doable,
Mm-hmm.
not half doable, or something that is doable, just not current. Like it's going to take some time. My interpretation of the physical Masogi is a battle of attrition, not a battle of intensity. The battle of intensity can break you. The battle of attrition will purge you of weakness. It's
Yes.
like the amount of the things that I derived from that. I don't still do that stuff. Like I think that I've thought about doing another show, and I think I could go there, but it wouldn't be the same thing.
Mm.
There was some stuff I was compensating for on that specific quest, but the amount that the return on the investment for that was something that lasted a lifetime.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to take on the physical Masogis, it has to be something that is like a while out.
Hmm.
It should be something that scares you, that you don't know if you could be successful, but you got to reverse engineer that thing, make it successful, build 1,000 little wins on the way up to it, smash that shit, and turn into a whole different creature.
Yeah. And I think in particular having a positive anticipation that you will succeed, I think is also important. Like to know that it's going to be really hard, but I know I actually have the skill set to be able to do this, because then I think the whole point of the Misogi is just in terms of like if you're sitting under a cold waterfall, you're just sitting and tolerating the cold. You can do it. And so then it becomes a mental battle of that I am choosing to do it. I am choosing to persist, and I am choosing to stay even when everything in me wants to be out of this. And I think that's kind of an important characteristic, like you say, with to have a Misogi that the person can't actually do is just setting them up for being more risk averse in future. I think those successes are really important, and not that you succeed every single time. Like I think, but that because circumstances can come up and things change, and sometimes, like maybe you've been training for the marathon and you're good, and then you go to run your race and 3 miles in, you twist your ankle. Like nobody could have anticipated that. That's not a failure. You just things happen, right? But it's knowing that it wasn't for a lack of preparation that you didn't finish your marathon, right? That you know you
Yeah.
were capable.
Yeah, and I really like that because I didn't place at that show.
Mm,
Like it's like the and it didn't mean like I was not happy because I felt like I like it was freaking hairs, but the that looking back doesn't change anything. And I think
yeah.
when you just put yourself on this freaking quest of this one thing and not the process to get there, you don't have the same return. And it's like Michael's misogi was exactly what I just described. There was preparation, you got good at it, you sent something that was within the capabilities, and you did it with people that could support you on it.
Yeah.
You go to freaking go to Alaska by yourself in that time period. What happens? And it's like the maybe, okay, sure, but it's like there you would have needed more preparation.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into our last topic pretty well was Michael's misogi and was the hunt. I think we can kind of it connects to a lot of the things we talked about here, but I
Mm,
think the hunt really centralized around three themes that we can kind of go over in one blast. Really, is that the hunt for him was rediscovering that primal engagement. It was going back to in like what would be at probably maybe the one of the only places and tasks that you could really reconnect yourself with a past world. I think, and I think that's how the theme was. And I really liked the hunt. I agree with you. I think the hunt. This book could have just been about the hunt,
yeah.
and it would have been a really awesome book. And in the hunt per se, it's that through this meaning and confidence earned through the embodied experience, not the theory of it, the physical hardship and mental resilience to get the task, the deficit of nature that he had had in his world and would be in the world, in this sort of call to the wild theme, and then the meaning he derived through the challenge. I think for me, it breaks the hunt was really quite cool because I think it in sort of if we go back to the very, very first question or first theme is the hunt kind of connects sort of my view of the modern world is that it just connected to this really high end physical stress to survive.
Mm,
They had to move camps around. They're eating freaking granola bars and they're losing weight because they're not their nutritional output is, say 3,000 and they're consuming 1,000 calories. So they're losing weight. And then connecting to sort of this nutritional world in that, okay, they're reconnecting. They brought food with them, but then that does connect to the hunter gatherers. Like they would have had to have the supplies necessary to go through the hunt. And he reconnects with this idea of the hunt. And I really like the hunt because then the hunt connected to the past, what would be like nutrition of the old world. Like the old world, we would have been really connected with our food, especially animals. It was like it was a ceremony when you killed animals, and it's like they used every single part of that animal, and that animal sacrificed itself for the good of the continued of the human species per se. But I like the hunt because it kind of reconnected that physical stress to survive with that sort of nutrition stress related to the struggle to survive, but also the gift and beauty of the animal and the gift of the hunt. And then it related into, I think, a bunch of themes with all these things that he discovered along the hunt, like sitting on a field and just looking at the quality of the vegetation and just sitting there and being bored and reflecting on his own experiences in the real world, where to me it connects. Oh man, I love like climbing mountains. I just like that's something else. You just like this day is this task, unplug from the universe, and that's what's going on. And I've noticed such a significant connection to my perceived well-being when I disconnect from the world on these outdoor experiences. For you, what would you say were the biggest takeaways from the story of the hunt for yourself?
I enjoyed the story of the hunt, and I think that the nature of it being so extreme that they were so far north and so isolated, and then it kind of wrapped like the remote isolation and beauty of that together with then the extreme physical exertion and caloric deprivation and all of that stuff. I think there's some themes in there that I resonated with more than others. I did appreciate the idea of talking about how people are so disconnected from our food sources, and about this. In talking to the hunters that he went with, they also talked about like the ethics around hunting. And I
Mm,
appreciated that whole conversation because I know I've never hunted myself, but I know and have known lots of people who hunt, whether it's deer or duck and geese or like lots of things. Um, and uh, have always like the people that I know who hunt have that same kind of reverence for animal life
mm,
and the rhythms of nature that these hunters were talking about. Like, I think there's something about hunting that not maybe for everybody, but for the people I've spoken to who hunt and eat their game that they get, that there is a real connection and reverence to the rhythms of nature. Um, and I liked that. I think that there's so few it's one of those things that I think if you didn't grow up doing it, then it may seem like kind of mysterious. And I think that many of us, especially people who grew up in urban areas, are just really disconnected from their food, not even just from the hunting, but often just really removed from agriculture and like have never planted a
mm,
seed and seen it sprout, even like that to little kids, that sometimes that seems like a miracle because they're just so rarely see it. Um, and so I liked he does romanticize it, but I do like that romantic notion of being more connected to our food. For me, it's not about wanting to go back to the primitive times, but it is about like, hey, maybe we actually need to dial back a little bit from industrial level farming and actually like go to support small farms that are
mm,
happening
mm,
in our part of the world, in our neighborhoods, and get to know the people who grow our food a little bit and that kind of thing.
mm,
I did also, separate from the hunt, there's this idea of them being then in this remote nature preserve. And that is something that, like, I could feel the awe in how he described that landscape simply because I
mm,
connect it to my own experiences in remote places in nature. I've never been to Alaska, but I've been into other natural um, preserves. And it's like,
mm,
if you've
mm,
always lived in an urban center and you've never gone to a dark sky preserve to see what the sky looks like when it's not tainted by human artificial lights,
light,
it
yeah.
is mind blowing what you
Mm,
can see in the sky and just the sense of awe that it gives us, to be dwarfed by nature and the landscape. I know you talk about having this experience in the mountains.
mm,
My parents were maritimers. I grew up spending lots of time on the ocean, and I get that experience of the ocean. Just you feel how tiny and small you are relative to the power of the natural world. Um, and there's something about it that is perspective shifting in understanding your proportional importance and place in the universe.
mm, mm. Yeah, I like there's just a lot of things in the Hunt story that I really agree. There's just so many things in my life. I think for me the biggest connection, I really liked the talking about the connection to the food source,
Hmm.
them hunting the older animal because that actually helps the herd,
Yeah.
him having that connection with the animal, and knowing where it came from and the story behind this animal and sort of I think it's interesting to think about a past time and how simple and it would have really been in relation to what would have just been normal.
Mhm.
And I think there's like it is cool, and I also agree with the romanticization of like not the past versions of us, but immersed into almost this surreal experience of what, in some aspects, certain timelines would have been like. I thought was really cool, but the connection really was to for me was the connection to adventure in relation to the outdoors. I think I really do believe that one of our one of the meanings of life is connecting to really surreal landscapes in the outdoors. I really do have this travel bug with nature,
Mm.
and it's not necessarily so specific. I really like climbing mountains. That's like my main passion. But there's just all these times, like it's like that when I got to go to New Zealand, this 12,000 miles away from home, and I'm standing on top of the second biggest volcano in New Zealand, and that volcano actually happens to be Mount Doom, and and like I had to climb up there with ice pick and crampons, and that the nobody does that in the winter, like that it was this crazy quest to get to this spot in nature. And I remember there was just like there was a lot to that story. I think that was more just my own story with my dad being really interested in Lord of the Rings, and then him passing away,
Mm.
and just how cool it would have been able to tell him how cool it would have been to tell him that I climbed Mount Doom. Like
Yeah.
he would just love that. But there was all kinds of things to that story. Like the first time I tried when I was in New Zealand, it was unsuccessful because the weather in that park gets really, really nasty in
Mm.
the winter. And then so the first time the weather got really bad and didn't end up making it. And then I re-prepared, got better equipment, got a better shot, went for it. And what was really cool about this quest is like we made it to the top, but the weather was kind of bad,
Mm.
but it opened up. So like the whole park was covered by nasty weather, and just near Ahoe, which was the mountain, Mount Doom, was just standing above it all. And we got this clear day. Um, and I just remember standing on top of that mountain, and I was just like looking at over New Zealand. And I remember just thinking like this is one of the meanings of life.
Yeah.
Like there's this past version of us that was just like walking around the planet. Like just like we just that's what we were doing. We had this, maybe we settled in this environment, maybe we moved, but there was this just connection with nature and the world that we don't have anymore. The and a lot of people don't have these experiences. A lot of people hike in my area, I think in Alberta area, but not all these people have these just really aggressive nature quests. And I think that's what's, and there's been nature quests since the dawn of time.
Hmm.
Like it's like people that going up that mountain is like a coming of age story for this random coming of age indigenous boy 10,000 years ago. And there's like these the Narahoe specifically had a lot of cultural significance in the area. And so it's like I think this adventure into the wild is something I can't say enough about that's positive.
Mm.
And I think that's what I really got from the story. Despite we've talked a lot of topics, a lot of the topics that related to the story, but I think that was my biggest connection, and what would be my takeaway that I would want people to get from this book is that you should go out fucking side and climb a mountain, or like do a hike, and just like spend this time where you don't have your phone. You maybe need to navigate a route. It's not like this just trail that they got this board that has like, okay, this is the trail. Go climb something that maybe has some navigation difficulty, so you had to prepare for it. Maybe so there's some nutritional challenges. You got to prepare for the feeding of it per se, and just get out into the wild. And I think that the hunt story really connected with my passion with getting out. And I think it's just of such high value, especially if you're from a more urban environment and you're just not used to disconnecting, being somewhere where there's no noise, where it's 100 miles from a town, and you had to get out there and it took a quest, and maybe you had to get up at 3 a.m, whatever it was, like whatever you had to do to just get out there. You don't have to. I really like the connection to some of this stuff where he was talking about, every like once a month, every 2 weeks, going out into nature, seeing the textiles once a day. If you go to a park, cool. No, I think it's like, even if it's not very often, doing something that might even involve like a multi-day journey out in the wild is just such a key experience for continuing to propagate, I think, good mental well-being over time. It doesn't necessarily have to turn into a big hobby. I love it, and it's a hobby for me. But I think the connection to this story that exists outside of everything else, all the nutrition stuff, romanticizing some past version of us. I think one of the key takeaways is that we should just go out into some nature-related experience and just be in awe of the simplicity of it.
Absolutely. Um, I think not everybody, like you said, is going to turn it into a hobby. Not everybody, maybe in terms of planning a misogi for yourself that is achievable, not everybody would be able to just like pack up and go camping 3 days,
Mm-hmm.
even, right? That even would feel overwhelming to some people. And so I think like start with getting outside to touch grass every day. Go for like find out where are the nature trails in your area or nearby and start walking there instead of just around your neighborhood, and start exploring your own backyard. And then over time the boundaries of what you see as your own backyard starts to grow a little bit more and a
Mm.
little bit more. um, and I love that idea. So um, let me ask you a question, Nate, as because I know we're kind of coming to the end of this and wrapping things up. Who do you think would benefit from reading this book? Who would you recommend The Comfort Crisis for?
Yeah, I think honestly, like, I think you'd have to already have some connection with fitness first. Like, I wouldn't say that, like, well, I don't know. It's just like, I think that some of the things just wouldn't be as interesting unless you had already made some connections with physical well-being
Hmm.
and nutritional related um, change, and especially like a desire to, I think, uh, implement some outdoors into your life. I think it could be good from everybody, but I just don't think it'd be as well digestible to somebody who, like, I think it's like, if you're interested in looking at fitness and training and nutrition a little bit different, then I think it's such an awesome book. I think the hunting story could apply to everybody. I think is an awesome thing, but I think it's specifically, it's like that next level. You've already kind of implemented training and nutrition, and then this might be an interesting sort of side quest for your own repertoire. I don't think it's a foundational exercise and nutrition step guide to how you should live your life with fitness. I think it's got some narratives that are up to your own sort of thought process. And I think if you already had some sort of thinking, this would be a nice sort of spice to something that's maybe a little bit different. But, and I mean, maybe if you're just getting into fitness, it could start you off on a good foot. But I think you'd get a little bit more out of it if you had already sort of started on the journey a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not an instructional text. He's
Mm-hmm.
more, so I think that this book would be great for if you are somebody who thinks of yourself as like a city person. If you are city folk
Mm.
and you are curious about what it would look like to incorporate uh, a little bit more nature in your life, or if you're just really aware that your modern city existence is really disconnected from how your ancestors lived, and you're curious about to see an example of how one other city guy ventured out
Hmm.
into the wild. I think that Michael Easter does a decent job of showing, because he was a city guy, and
Hmm.
he kind of walks you through how did he baby step his way into this pretty arduous misogi, spending a
Hmm.
month in Alaska, and kind of what are the benefits that that did for him. I think that, yeah. So that's who I think would really enjoy this book, particularly if you enjoy those kind of romantic notions about escaping into the wild. If that's something
Hmm.
that appeals to you, if you like those kinds of like movies and books, I think that
Hmm.
they would enjoy this book too.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
So, if our listeners have questions or want to reach out, how can the good creatures of this world find you on the internet, Nate?
Yes, you can find me at Nate Bolding on all socials, really. And then I think you can also tune in to the Creatures We Become podcast, The Creatures We Become, on, I think we're on Instagram, TikTok. And how about yourself?
You can find me at Petrina Calder. As Nate said, we also have accounts for The Creatures We Become. The podcast itself is made available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And we would also like to encourage anybody who has any questions about this book or any other topic that might fall into Nate and I's wheelhouse, please feel free to reach out to us. You can connect with us on any of those social media channels. And yeah, I would like to offer a sneak preview of what comes next, but Nate and I actually haven't figured that out yet. So please feel free to reach out with your comments, your questions. We would love to hear from you.